And we will do that to her glory and obviously to the glory of God. So let's all stand. And we're going to sing Because He Lives and It Is Well With My Soul. God sent His Son, they called Him Jesus. He came to love, heal and forgive. He lived and died to buy my pardon. An empty grave is there to prove my Savior lives. Because He lives, I can face tomorrow. Because He lives, all fear is gone. Because I know He holds the future, and life is worth the living just because He lives. And then one day, across the river, I'll find life's final war with pain. And then as death gives way to victory, I'll see the lights of glory, and I know He lives. Because He lives, I can face tomorrow. Because He lives, all fear is gone. Because I know He holds the future, and life is worth the living just because He lives. Sing that again. Because He lives. Because He lives, I can face tomorrow. Because He lives, all fear is gone. Because I know He holds the future, and life is worth the living just because He lives. When peace like a river is well, it is well with my soul. And Lord, it's the day when nothing shall be sight. The clouds he rolled back as a scroll. The trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul.
It is well.
It is well
With my soul.
with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul. Amen. Please be seated.
Good afternoon. What a beautiful day. Bittersweet in many ways, but yet still a beautiful day because our granny has won the victory for her life, for all eternity. My name is Sandra Arnold, and some of you may remember me by Sandra Wolf. I was born and raised in a small town in Virginia called Gate City. And Virginia and Tennessee, the state line's bordered by about 10 miles. So in my adult life, I moved to Kingsport and married and began to raise children. And I was raised to know God. But when I got grown, I had to find my own way in knowing God, not through mama and daddy anymore. So at the age of about 26, I began that pursuit. Ended up going to a church in Kingsport, and it just so happened that there was a couple there that reached out to me. The weird thing about this was it was probably one of the biggest churches in Kingsport, but I was serious about pursuing more truth. And so I prayed about it. I seriously prayed about it, and I said, this is where I'm going to go Sunday. So I took my little 18-month-old toddler. When I walked in, I immediately realized that I was the only black face in the crowd. And if I'm being honest with you, I was very uncomfortable. But yet I was very committed to knowing more of what God's purpose for my life was. And so I attended a few Sundays, and one Sunday after church, this lady approached me. And she was so warm and loving, just the look in her face. And she said, you know, I've noticed you've been coming to visit. And she said, I just want to reach out to you and introduce myself. It would be Neyland. "37 years later, she is known to me and my family as Granny Annie and Granddaddy Bob. With my little toddler, I told Blake, I said, I've got to tell this story, because if you know Ann, you're not going to be too serious with her for too long, right? I had a little toddler, and he was busy little fella. Many of you know my son, Chris. And so he wouldn't stay in the nursery very long, so Granny said, okay, we're going to come up with a plan. We're going to sit back toward the end of the church, and I'll bring some things, that being the teacher that she was, and we'll just keep him busy and keep him quiet. And so we did that. One Sunday, she decided she was going to teach him how to make paper airplanes. In church, during the service. I loved it. So they did. And so they made it, and it was so cool, and Chris was just amazed, and she handed it to him. Well, he takes it, and he just, look, Granny, waving flags right in the middle of the church service. And needless to say, we did not do that anymore. I think she substituted with crayons and a coloring book the following Sunday. But she was, I've been thinking a lot about her this week and what she meant to me and my family. So dear to us that my daughter's middle name is Ann. And I've been talking to the Lord about her this week and the gift that she was in our lives. And Granddaddy Bob, this is what God literally spoke to my heart this week. He said she represented my goodness to you and your family. When I think of Granny Annie, I think about the goodness of God, because she gave it in every form and facet. She poured it into your life unconditionally. Granny and I had a conversation about this very day many years ago. She told me a little bit about what she wanted, and she asked me personally to sing. And the thing that she said, now you know me well enough to know, no gloom and doom, no sadness. I want a soulful song. That's what she said. So today, Granny, I honor you, and I honor your life. I honor what you stood for and what you've left here on this earth to stand for, to the glory of God. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, help me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn through the storm, through the night. Lead me on to your light, precious Lord. Take my hand, lead me home. And when my way grows drear, precious Lord, linger near. When my life is almost gone, hear my cry, Lord, hear my call. Hold my hand, lest I fall. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home.
Wow, what a beautiful song. Precious Lord, take my hand. And that was one of Ann's favorite songs. I know she's got a big smile on her face right now. But I'd like to welcome everyone here this afternoon. My name is Barry Holt. I serve as one of the elders here in the Greater Nashville Church. I've had the privilege of knowing Bob and Ann for over 30 years, and before my hair turned gray. But Bob and I served as fellow elders together for 3 years, and that was one of the greatest joys and a greatest blessing that I've had in my life, and so just during that time to be together. But we're here today to celebrate and honor the life of our dear sister, Ann Neyland. I know she would probably be looking down going, you shouldn't make this big of a deal about me. But she's not here, and we're going to do that anyway. She can talk to us later. But I know Ann holds a very dear place in all of our hearts, and she is going to be greatly missed by all of us that loved her. I'd like to express our love and deepest sympathy to Bob, Ann's devoted husband for over 65 years, as well as her two sons, Reese and wife Mary Kay, Blake and wife Leanne, her brothers Jack Webb and wife Sarah, David Webb and wife Brenda, 4 grandchildren, Robbie, Joseph, Luke, and David, and 4 great-grandchildren, Cora, Reese, Jackson, and Micah, as well as several nephews and nieces, which I've met today. And to all the extended family and friends in our loss, our thoughts and prayers are with one another. We need to be praying for each other during this time, but we're definitely praying for the family, that God will strengthen you, comfort you. I think, yes, your presence of being here brings a big comfort already to us. But Joanne Webb Neyland was born May the 2nd, 1931, and finished her race here on earth Wednesday, January the 15th, 2020. Paul says in 2 Timothy 4, verses 7 and 8, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. You know, this too can be said about Ann Neyland's life. She lived it to the full. She kept the faith. She finished the race, and she finished strong. You know, Ann was a faithful and loving wife, a mother, grandmother, a great-grandmother, sister, and friend. And as we heard a little bit earlier, she was affectionately known to many as Granny Annie. And that was even by those who were not related to her. Again, she's going to be greatly missed. You know, Ann graduated with a bachelor's degree in education from the University of Tennessee and a master's degree in education from East Tennessee State University. She taught secondary school for over 40 years. Her passion for teaching was obvious, and she was beloved by all of her students. The love of teaching continued throughout Ann's life. To the very end, she was still teaching us very valuable life lessons, which I'm very grateful for, and I know you are. You know, Ann's greatest legacy is her selfless love for her family and her sincere faith and love for God and for others. She and Bob have been a part of the Greater Nashville Church family for the last 30 years, and a part of our Pacesetter ministry, which is a daytime ministry for more seasoned, retired folks. And so they've been a part of that ministry for 23 years. They were there when it began. And it's a great group. Well, this past Wednesday at the Pacesetter midweek, they have a midweek service, and they gathered around in a circle. And they had a time of sharing fond memories and stories about our dear sister Ann. Here's some of the words that were used to describe Ann: loving, kind, spiritual, faithful, loyal, wise, encouraging, persevering, friend, servant, generous, happy, committed, content, sense of humor, directionally challenged. Yes, I heard some stories about Ann and some of the other sisters that would be driving to study the Bible with some of their friends, and they would get lost. You know, as I heard those words, they also shared stories about Ann that I kind of picked up from those stories, different words. But I'd like to share with you just some of those stories that I didn't know, you probably have never heard. But one shared about Ann and Bob. They had a condo. There was a flood back in May of 2010. They had lost most all their earthly possessions. I heard Ann kind of walked out with just the clothes on her back and her pocketbook. But Ann was determined to give to the special missions contribution that was in May, which is when the flood hit. And so she asked one of the sisters to help her sell a silver place setting so that she could give. That sister said, I was so encouraged by her sacrificial heart. Another shared, Ann always encouraged me whenever I saw her smiling face. And when I would be feeling a little down, she would say to me, keep your eyes fixed on heaven. Another said Ann was always asking about how my girls were doing. And she reminded her so much of her mother. One said Ann reached out to my grandmother. She brought her food. She loved her. She studied the Bible with her. And my grandmother was baptized into Christ when she was in her 90s. Another said Ann would call and reach out to my mom. She stayed connected with her and became one of my mom's favorite friends, best friends. Another said Ann taught my daughter in school and has loved and maintained a relationship with her throughout the years. Another said Ann was low-key about herself. She was legally blind, but Ann would say to me, I just want to be the best blind disciple that I can be. You know, Ann taught us all many lessons, not just with words, but by how she lived life. You know, Proverbs 31:25, which is the scripture, Proverbs 31 on the back of your program, totally describes Ann was a Proverbs 31 woman. But verse 25 says she clothed herself with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. And I remember about 12 years ago, the church here was interviewing couples to fill a ministry staff position here in the church, and they would come and stay at our house for the weekend, the couples. And so the first couple comes in, and that Friday afternoon, I hear on my back door. And I look, and it's Bob Neyland. He's there holding one of Ann's delicious homemade pecan pies. Yes, world-renowned pecan pies. So I'm like, man, that's awesome. Thank you. Okay, so the second couple comes in the following weekend. They're staying with us. And that next Friday afternoon, there's another on our back door. Guess who it was? Yes, there was Bob Neyland standing at my back door with another one of Ann's delicious pecan pies. I told Bob, I said, you know, I think I could get used to this. We could drag this interview process out for a very long time. We wanted to, but we didn't. We moved ahead. But the lessons I learned from Ann in this story was she taught me how to laugh at the days to come. What I mean by that is, as Ann grew older, she didn't use that as an excuse, but she looked and found unique ways to continue to serve. She did what she could do. You know, there's limitations as you get older. She did what she could do, and that brought her much joy. And that pecan pie brought us much joy as well. I believe Ann could laugh at the days to come as she was getting older and experiencing the limitations that come along with the aging process, because she knew that with each new limitation brought her one step closer to her ultimate goal of being with Jesus in heaven. 2 Corinthians 4:16 through 18 says, "Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." Anne could laugh at the days to come because she had fixed her eyes on Jesus and was confident of his promises of being with him in heaven for eternity. You know, Proverbs 31 verse 26 says, "She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue." Anne was truly a woman who was full of wisdom and shared faithful instruction every opportunity she had. You know, at this time we have an audio clip of Ann Neyland teaching a women's class. It was on a Saturday, and she is sharing her wisdom and faithful instruction. So at this time we'd like to listen to Ann's teaching here.
The following is an excerpt from a class that Ann faith. And in this particular excerpt, she is quoting several verses from Psalm 139 and applying those partially in helping us realize that God made each one of us different and that each of us needs to feel love and acceptance. And this is particularly important when we think about our children and our grandchildren.
Another scripture that's been a definite part of my life and has influenced me greatly is Psalm 139, 13 through 16. "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." They're doing what they want to do. So my connection with those grandsons is being interested in what they are interested in. I can't expect them to like what I like. I have to make the effort to know what each of them likes, and it's totally different. So think about your own family and the diversity there and appreciate that. And then think about your children, how unique, how different they are. When they look in your eyes, they need to see reflected back to you, there is nothing you can do that will make me love you any the less. Now, you may not approve of what they're doing, but you need to be sure that they feel your love. That's where you can teach them about God, because that's what God does for us. Let them see you make a mistake. You don't have to be perfect. Let them see you make a mistake and talk to them about that. Talk to them, because that's what God does for us.
My name is Reese Neyland. I am the oldest son of Neyland, and many of you know and others I don't, and look forward to getting to see you today. I really appreciate you showing up, but even more than that, I have some things that I want to be thankful for in the beginning here. You should know I adored my mother, and you can call me a mama's boy, and I'm good with that. She was my hero, and she had a profound influence on my life, and it's very difficult to imagine now that she's gone, but I'm going to appreciate what she has meant to me for so many years. You know, in John chapter 19, when Jesus is on the cross, perhaps you know this already, Jesus saw his mother and the disciple he loved standing nearby. And he said to his mother, "Dear woman, here is your son." To the disciple, who we believe was the Apostle John, "Here is your mother." From that time on, the disciple took her into his home. Jesus loved his mother, and Jesus wasn't physically going to be able to be present anymore. But he wanted some folks to take care of his mother. And I'm sure that they did. And I just want to say thank you for all of those here today who have helped take care of my mother for many, many years. You know, we've been in Los Angeles for the last 30 years, and we were not physically able to be here. But thank you to the Nashville Church, past and present members, for all you did to take care of my mother. Thank you to the Webb family who were here, who so many of them did so many things to take care of my mother. Thank you, Blake and Leanne, who have done so much. I'm sitting on the beach in Southern California, and here they are, wearing themselves out to take care of my parents. Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Dad, for choosing my mother. And thank you for taking care of her and loving her for well over 65 years. I'm proud of my mother. A few things I'll say. My mother was a strong Christian woman. Maybe you figured that out already. She helped many women become Christians by personally studying the Bible with them. She helped many more and strengthened them in their faith so that they could make their way along the journey. The reason that the Neyland family has a thread of faith in it is because of my mother. And my son Robbie, the first thing he said, and as we were discussing Granny Annie's passing, he said, "Where would the Neylands be without her?" And that is a scary thought, actually. A lot of males, rough around the edges. My mother was very, I consider her to be unique. She said things that I never heard anybody else say. She did things that I never heard anybody else do or saw anybody else do. And this is one of the things I like to describe her with. She was the most righteous and least judgmental person I ever met. Astounding. And, you know, some of you might or might not know, but I wasn't much of a Christian during high school and college. And, you know, of course, my parents knew that. But, you know, my mother in particular, she never lectured me. She never scolded me. She never changed the way that she loved me or expressed her love or vision in me. And, of course, years later when I had children of my own and, you know, I'm stressing out over how they're doing and how they're progressing. And I went to my mom and I said, "Mom, how did you deal with all that during those years when I was not even trying to be a Christian?" And her answer was powerful. She said, "I just prayed. I just prayed." She was a strong Christian woman. She was a wonderful teacher, that's already been mentioned. She had a great passion for teaching, and she just kept going back to school to learn more about how to teach. And even after she got her master's degree, she kept taking classes to learn how to be a better teacher. And this just continued. She was always, she taught me to love to read. And my mother told me that if you will love to read, and you'll read good literature, you'll always know how to spell, you'll always know how to write, and you'll always know how to speak. Of course, my mother taught me a lot of things I didn't really want to learn, like how to wax floors, and how to polish silver, and how to vacuum, and how to dust, and make sure you dust the baseboards. That was her way to test. When you know, see if you did a good job, she'd get right down on the floor and run her finger across the top of the baseboards. Make sure you got those. Most of you didn't know her maybe that way, but she was teaching all the way to the end. She was a fantastic mother. She was such a visionary for me in my life. She always was convinced that I could do whatever I set my heart on, and whatever my dreams were, she was going to be there to support me to realize those dreams. At the same time, she was a disciplinarian. A lot of you know her when she was Sweet Granny Annie, but I knew her before that. She was a disciplinarian. It was none of this, wait till your father gets home. That didn't make it. She believed in choices, and when I was younger, it was, you're going to obey me or else. That was a choice. When I got a little older, she had an interesting philosophy about parenting, and I don't even know if you can really appreciate it. It was so different then, and I think it would be different now. She told me over and over again, many times, says, I have got you until you're 18 years old, and so my job is to teach you to make good choices during the 18 years I got you, and then I'm going to send you out there to find your own way. And she always told me, says, now I have raised you to have faith, and I have raised you to have character, and I have raised you to be a mature young man, and I am confident that you're going to make great choices. And of course, I went out there, and a lot of times I didn't make good choices. But, my mother's words were ringing in my ears. And my mother's word, when I was making bad choices, her words haunted me. And perhaps that was part of her genius. But anyway, she was confident I was going to make good choices. She took that whole thing about 18 years old serious. I don't know if there's any teenagers here, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I had no curfew my junior and senior year in high school. She used to say, you could come in anytime you want to. You could come in at 2 a.m., you could come in at 4 a.m., you could come in at 6 a.m., just as long as you get up and have pancake breakfast with the family and go to church. We're good. And then I was 18 years old, and she'd been preparing this for me for a long time. We're going to, I'm pretty much going to give you over to the decisions you make. And so just to make sure, she took me for a walk during my senior year in high school around the neighborhood there. And whenever my mother wanted to take a walk with me, I knew there was an agenda. So she had an agenda, and so she said, so Reese, where are you thinking about going to college? And of course, that's the way she was. She wasn't making up in her mind where I was going to go to school. She was like, you go to school where you want to go. She said, you can go far away or you can go close by. And I was hoping to play basketball in college. I was considering all kinds of options, and we talked about that a little bit. And some of the schools I was thinking about going to were very close to where I lived. And so she just wanted to make sure I understand. She goes, well, Reese, you can go far away or you can go close by, but you can't live here anymore. So my mother kicked me out of the house when I was 18. But not because of how I behaved, but because she believed that at this point she had done her job and it was up to me to go out and figure out my way in life. So I hope you get a chance to read the obituary. My favorite line in it is, her ability to love so many so well was remarkable. And I saw that all of my life. In middle school, one of my basketball teammates they were very poor. So didn't tell anybody, of course. That wasn't my mother's way. She went out and bought him a dress shirt and a tie so that he could have something to wear to the sports banquet at the end of the year. He'd never had a dress shirt and a tie. Gave it to me to give to him and informed me that I was going to show him how to tie that tie, which I did. She loved food. That's been mentioned already. She understood the magic of fresh baked goods in a home-cooked meal. And many of you have received that blessing. She passed her recipes out all over Middle Tennessee, and beyond. She was known to be a good cook, and she shared that way with people. She gave out a lot of $20 bills, so I came to find out. If you were in her church or in her circle of friends and you were a young man or a young woman and you didn't maybe have a lot of money and you're going to school, she might just come up to you. She wouldn't say a word. Nobody'd see her do it. She'd just give you a $20 bill. When I went away to play basketball at Old Dominion University, first game, they came up for the game, and it was after the game, and my teammates hadn't met my parents yet, and so I go out after the game's over. We come out of the locker room. I can't remember whether we won or lost or how I played or if I played, but I know I saw this. When I came out, all of my teammates were surrounding my mother, and I thought, well, man, what nice teammates I have. They're reaching out to my parents. Well, of course, you probably know already, Granny Annie was handing out homemade cookies, fudge, and brownies. And she did that at every game that she came to. And my teammates were always like, is your mother coming to the game today? So many stories I've heard. I'm in a room full of people that, you have your own point where you have been touched by her life. Marilyn Reeves told me this story recently that I'd never heard, that just so amazing. It so epitomizes her. She was teaching the Kids Kingdom classes here on a Wednesday night, and this is a number of years ago, and they asked her to bring a snack for the kids. So she brought beef stroganoff because she was concerned that the kids might not have had time to have a really home-cooked meal and a good dinner before they got to church that night. Who does that? Who does that? Her ability to love so many so well was remarkable. Let me sum it up this way. If you needed a sister, she'd be your sister. If you needed a grandmother, she'd be your grandmother. If you needed a mother, she'd be your mother. If you needed a friend, she'd be your friend. I love you, Mom.
Okay. I'm Mary Kay, Reese's wife, and that was beautiful. I would like to share a little bit about Granny Annie from a grandmother's point of, from the beloved Granny Annie. Before I do, though, when I married Reese, she presented me with this. And women in here know what this is. This is a recipe file. And there were about 100 handwritten recipe after recipe. And she said, these are family favorites. I thought, wow, wonder what's in here. And who referred to it earlier? I have the recipe for the utterly deadly pecan pie. You got that recipe? And then there was one in here, a very special one, sausage pastrata. And the reason that's so special, and this was just amazing, the special touch that Anne put into what she did, simple but thoughtful, heartfelt gestures. And the sausage pastrata recipe she made when I think we were engaged or we were visiting, or it was our first year marriage or whatever, but it was Christmas, and she made this for Christmas Day, and that became our Christmas Day meal starting over 35 years ago. And my kids demand it every Christmas, and I tried to change the recipe a little bit, a few times. I still try. And one of my sons pulled me aside once and he goes, I know you're trying to make this healthy. It's obvious what you're doing. You're using whole wheat and you're putting in low-fat milk. We know what you're doing. Stop doing it and make it just the way Granny makes it. As far as being a grandmother, and she talked about it in the video that we saw, and she talked about how she loves her grandchildren individually. I spoke to each of my sons, and I just want to tell you a couple of things that they said about her. My son David said when Granny realized I was interested in storytelling and writing back, when he was, in his earlier years in school, she encouraged him to develop these skills. And I found her intelligence to be cool and sophisticated. It made me want to be smart like her. She bought me a beautiful journal featuring F. Scott Fitzgerald, first draft of The Great Gatsby, etched in gold. She was keen to pay attention to the talents of the people she loved. And he added, during my tween years, my introverted and shy years, Granny never made me feel awkward about who I was, even when I did. She always found the good and supported it. My son Joseph, who is not able to be here, he's in Norway. When he said what was extraordinary, because I could use words like kind and thoughtful, intelligent, caring, generous, engaging, and on. He goes, you're probably going to hear all those words today, which we've probably heard all of those plus more. He said, I just want to tell a story about something extraordinary about her. When I married Sunniva, Granny embraced her as her own. Sunniva never really had a grandmother. And so Joseph and Sunniva living in Norway, because Sunniva is Norwegian, Granny Annie would start emailing her just to try to get to know her from a distance. And when Sunniva was working on her master's thesis, she chose a Norwegian nonfiction author. Granny went out and bought that author's books and started reading them so that she would have something to talk about with Sunniva. Who does that? And when she passed, Sunniva genuinely feels like she's lost her own grandmother. Granny had a way she adored her daughter-in-laws and connected with each of them exactly as though they were hers. She loves her son's choices. And then my son Robbie, he just said, she's simple yet thoughtful ways, like slipping the $20. Once when he was single and going to college, she gave him a recipe and then mailed him all the ingredients to make it. And he summed it up quite simply. She would remember and anticipate your needs. Then she would meet them in a very practical, understated, yet helpful way. We love Granny Annie. The Neyland family adores her. Her grandsons adore her. Her daughter-in-laws connected and adore her as their own. And having her as a mother-in-law is a blessing beyond what anyone could imagine in a mother-in-law. And this was just the start of many thoughtful gestures and helping me and supporting me through all the years, especially when I was raising children. And she had my back. That's how I always felt. Granny had my back and supported me and loved me. So I just wanted to get to share from that angle, and we honor her today. Thank you.
Get this down. Too many tall people. I'm David Webb, and I'm the youngest of the 3 Webb children. Ann was about 18 years older than I, and our brother Jack was about 2 years younger than Ann, so making me the late baby in the family. During my early years, Ann was either a student at the University of Tennessee or was teaching in the Oak Ridge area, and my first vivid memory of Ann was Ann and Bob's wedding in August of 1954 when I was 5 years. The ceremony took place in our home in a living room that would accommodate about 30 people. That is, if they stood real close together. From my perspective, the wedding was a major inconvenience. During the summer months, except on Sunday mornings when the family attended church, none of my routine activities required a clean face, shoes and socks, starched pants, or on most days even a shirt. The wedding ceremony was at 2 in the afternoon, and after becoming bored with all the prenuptial festivities, I climbed a tree just outside the living room window, which is where I was when someone came to get me for the wedding ceremony. When I was older, I visited Ann and Bob for a few days each summer. This generally began with an adventurous ride on the Greyhound bus. And after arriving in Knoxville, or in later years to their home in the Bristol-Kingsport area, Ann carried and introduced me to places like Grandfather Mountain, Clingman's Dome, Andrew Johnson's home and tailor shop in Greenville, numerous parks and museums. These trips helped me appreciate historical figures and events, and they awakened in me an innate curiosity in the diversity of the biological world, which has yet to be satiated. In the summers, Ann would bring Reese and Blake to the farm in West Tennessee for a week-long visit. A lot of things, right? Our parents loved these visits and relished the time with their grandson. I was only about, 5 or 6 years older than Reese, but I was given the oversight responsibility for his stay. I took my role seriously and tried to introduce Reese to all aspects of farm life. His recollection of these visits it was like going to boot camp, which I remember sometimes did require some discipline in order to maintain the pecking order. I couldn't do it now, but Blake, being younger than Reese, he was a constant danger to himself. We had a barnyard, and he would sit up on the fence, and so he would often try to catch the baby pigs in the barnyard with the mother sow nearby. This was a very dangerous thing, rarely undertaken by an experienced farmer. Some of my fondest memories of Reese and Blake were these summers on the family farm. And I think that Ann's intent was to connect her boys to the world where she grew up. I think she did. For the past few years, Ann was in a downsizing mode, and if you called to schedule a visit to her house, she likely told you, if you can't eat it or read it, do not bring it to my house. When you left their house, she insisted you carry something with you that could range from a silver tray to a manual sausage grinder. And she tried to give that to me on at least 2 occasions, and somebody in the audience may possess that treasured item. In her later years, most phone conversations with Ann ended abruptly. She might call and talk for 20 minutes, and then in the middle of the conversation, she might suddenly say, "I've got to go," and there would be a click in about 1 second. Ann was a very non-judgmental and accepted people being people. She always found the good in them and encouraged and appreciated individuality. She possessed a sense of humor and could laugh at herself and laugh with you even if it was at her expense. Ann's rare ability to connect and relate to all ages generally made you feel special and important to her. Our children, John and Rebecca, as young children and as adults, love to visit and talk with Aunt Ann. They describe her as the coolest old lady ever. They were amazed that things which upset most adults did not even faze her. Although Ann and I were separated by almost 18 years in age, we had a very special relationship. She encouraged me in numerous ways and greatly influenced my life and the lives of my family. She will be missed, but we cherish our many fond memories. In closing, I'd like to read from Galatians 5, verse 22 and the first part of 23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. The Spirit was alive in Anne, and the fruits of the Spirit characterized her life. Jesus was Lord in Anne's life. She was a true disciple. Her life was one of service to God and others. She was firm in her faith until the end and has now gone to claim her eternal reward.
I'm Lois Meredith, and I'm Ann's friend. Ann had a birthday she'll never forget. It was May 2nd, 2010, the year of the Great Flood. She heard a knock at the door very hard, and a fireman saying, "Evacuate, evacuate, get out, everyone out right now." Literally, Ann and Bob picked up a few things and went out the door. The water was already rising. Their car was flooded. They made it to the street. They got to Jack and Evelyn Reese's house. And there they said, what had just happened? And they prayed. And they said some more. And then Ann said to Evelyn, "I need to get these clothes off me and get them in the washing machine and dryer, because tomorrow morning I'm making a plan. I've got to make a plan to go forward." And that she did. Every single day she had a plan and knew. Now, Ann was 78 years old during this flood. She wasn't a youngster, but she always had a plan. Many of you were part of that plan. You helped with furniture and clothing and actually the building of their new home. And you know, Ann was a glass half full kind of person. She never saw the bad in it. She never said, "Why me?" What she did say was, "See this kitchen? I wouldn't have this if it hadn't been for the flood." Or, "See that walk-in shower? I wouldn't have this if it hadn't been for the flood." She only saw the good, even in something that big. And of course, I think her blindness has been mentioned, and she never said, "Why me?" No, she had a plan. She organized her kitchen so she could reach every single thing in it without knowing what it was, because she knew it by where it was and by touch. And you did not mess with her kitchen, right, Bob? And yes, she said, "I'm the best one-eyed disciple that there is," and she was. Ann was very purposeful. She didn't do anything by accident. She was purposeful in the people that she met or sat with, the paysetters, someone she needed to know a little bit more about, or something that she still needed to say to them. She was purposeful as she went and had her hair done in how to share Jesus with her hairdresser. And many of you know, she had it for many years. She had her hair done every Friday. And you know what she said to me? More than once. She said, "Well, I do believe on my way to heaven I'll be stopping here to have my hair done." She was purposeful in her gifts. Whether that was a gift for her great-grandchildren, she wanted them to know how to read. She wanted them to make sure that Cora had the best books, or Reese or Jackson, and she wanted them to know her. She loved her great-grandchildren, and Cora, she was really glad she had one great-granddaughter, because there were all boys in that family. So she was purposeful in everything she did. When Jenny Scott died, Ann said, "We are going to love Elizabeth," and that's Jenny's daughter, well. She will always feel our love and respect. Now, Elizabeth lived in Arkansas. Ann lived in Nashville. It wasn't like, let's have coffee every other day, or every week, or every month. There was distance here. And Ann said, "I am going to make her feel loved." And she started these projects with Elizabeth. She talked to her, learned about her. The kind of garden she had. She was a land person, outdoors person like her father. And she would send her bulbs to plant in her garden. Or she'd send special herbs. And every time that Bob Scott went there, he had another project for Elizabeth to do. And when she came here to visit, Ann had special cheeses or olive oil, something very specific to Elizabeth's life. And a couple days ago, Elizabeth called me, and she said, I still have one project left to do. I have holly trees to plant. They were a gift from Ann Neyland, and I'll plant them in the spring. Who does that? That is love. That is being purposeful. She was purposeful in making chess pies for Reese anytime he came to visit. And sometimes she made two because he ate one whole one, and we were never to tell Mary Kay. And she had special candies in their bedrooms when they came, or the barbecue that they liked. She was an extraordinary person. To me, she called us soul buddies. She was a gift to me from God. She knew everything there was to know about me, everything. And I dare say I knew most about her. All of my family and my friends, all of them, knew Ann Neyland. Whether they ever met her, most of them didn't, but they knew her, and they knew her well. My doctors knew her. My hairdresser knew her. I never had to worry about what I was going to say, or how I was going to say it, or if it was the right thing, or if I would hurt her feeling. I never, ever had to worry about that. I was always accepted and loved. We taught each other a lot, just constantly. Bible studies, communication skills. We just were teaching each other all the time. She taught me about history. I didn't know much about that. And I taught her about music. In the last year of Ann's life, it was difficult. Her health wasn't too good, and her energy was low. She spent some time in rehab and in hospitals. And she talked a lot about death. She loved to read the passages in the Bible about heaven. She read Randy Alcorn's book on heaven from cover to cover. She wanted to go to heaven and talked about it over and over again that last year. One of the last things I want to tell you about our friendship was when she was in rehab, she was having some digestive problems, and she had an accident. Pretty significant one, I imagine. And so she said to the nurse, she said, just throw all this stuff in the trash can. And then she remembered, oh, but that's my favorite nightgown. And she said, oh, wait, that nightgown, just wrap it in a towel and put it in the corner. I'll give it to my friend. and she did. The last month, Ann really wanted to be with her Jesus. She said, I didn't know dying would be so hard. She wanted to cross over that bridge. The day I left the hospital on November 15th, I was rejoicing in her victory, but oh, the hole I felt, the hollowness I felt. And just a few hours later, I read this quote from Mindful Christianity. It said, grief is a reminder that love was present, and that even if it's no longer in its original form, that love still exists. And Neyland will always be part of me. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Darla Rowe. My husband, Nathan. Nathan had the privilege of serving in the eldership of the Greater Nashville Church alongside Bob and Barry and Dave Mundy and Priestley Reeves. And it was during that time that Ann and I became really close friends. I called her my bosom friend, a term you know if you love Anne of Green Gables, like Ann and I did. She spelled her name Ann with an E. There were times when on paper we were asked to disciple Bob and Ann, but truthfully, Ann discipled me every day. It was just her life that discipled me. I learned so much from her. She was a teacher, but above all, she was a learner. I think being a learner makes you a really good teacher. She was an avid reader, and she delighted in learning anything new. In her 80s, she learned how to use the computer, as was mentioned earlier, so she could communicate with her family all over the world. She did most of her composing by hand, though, and she would write out her Bible studies to help the women of the Pace Setters ministry that she and Bob, along with Jack and Evelyn Reese, and later Henry and Janice Cottrell, led together for so many years. She was devoted to those women and prayed for them and thought about their needs and wrote out Bible studies she thought would help them. When she and I would meet, it was usually a puffy muffin where we would order the same meal every time, and it included congealed salad. Now, I know there's some young people here who have no idea what congealed salad is. She would pull out her notes and go through her list of questions and concerns to get help and advice. Ann delighted in sharing what she knew and what she was learning with other people, especially the Bible, as has been mentioned. She would say to me, "It is my job to help these old women get to heaven." And undoubtedly she did. I think of the party they're having now, that they are all reunited. Ann and her bestie, Jenny Scott, Rose Bell, Violet Jones, Maggie Sharp, Miss Susie Kay, Miss Maddie, our Marcy Turner, and just the other day, our Gerline. I know when she got there, she was surprised to see Gerline. They were probably just like excited to see each other. I didn't know Ann until 1996 when our family moved to Nashville. I can remember the very first time I met her because she was bringing us a meal. Ann always loved people, and as it's been said, she was known to many in the church as Mama Ann or Granny Annie. Ann was mother, grandmother, sister, and friend, and all of us who know her have special memories of the special things she did, and so many of them have been shared today. And I was going to share the story that Marilyn told, but I won't since Reese already mentioned it. I love that story about the beef stroganoff. In Acts 16, it says, one of those who was listening was a woman from the city of Thyatira named Lydia, a dealer in purple cloth. She was a worshiper of God. The Lord opened her heart to respond to Paul's message. When she and the members of her household were baptized, she invited us to her home. If you consider me a believer in the Lord, she said, come and stay at my house. And she persuaded us. I don't know how many times Ann told me about new people who had moved into the church, or someone who was visiting, or family members of the church that she and Bob would have over to eat and even to spend the night. People that she didn't know, people who didn't know her. And she didn't care if they were black, white, purple, or green. I think sometimes family members would be kind of in awe if they were from Tennessee once they heard that last name. Then often those talks would turn into Bible discussions and often Bible studies. If she ever heard of a need in the church or anything else, she did something to meet that need. And Ann loved life. She had such a great sense of humor. We laughed all the time. We would compare our sometimes naughty and usually hilarious stories about our grandsons. And no subject with Ann was off limits. Ann would talk about sex, the human body, her aging body. She was not self-conscious one little bit. And that's all I'll say about that, since it's a mixed company. Ann could roll with whatever life threw at her. Cancer, blindness. She told me raising Blake prepared her for anything. When I think about Proverbs 31, I think about Ann, especially that verse 25, she can laugh at the days to come, which was something I was intentionally praying to learn. So though I'm still working on that, God did answer my prayer through Ann, and also through suffering, something she could definitely understand but could not teach me. That's something we all have to learn. And the last thing I want to say is that how much Ann loved her family. Bob, in her final days, she was concerned for you, and she expressed her concern to me during our last visit. And she loved her boys, and she still called Reese and Blake boys. I would write down the date on my calendar when the boys were going to be in town for a visit, because I knew not to call her if the boys were in town. And she loved her girls. It was such a treasure for her when y'all got married and she finally had daughters. She loved y'all so much and talked about you all the time. And she loved her grandsons, and she prayed and trusted God for your lives and your futures. Cora, she loved you so much. She would tell me all the things you would do when you were a baby and you were learning to walk, and she was so excited when you started reading to your little sister. And the last thing is just when I left Ann for the last time, she was in the hospital. That day she was really uncomfortable, not really herself, not really able to talk much. I kissed her forehead and both of her cheeks, and we looked deeply into each other's eyes, and her last words for me were, "I'll be watching for you. And my bosom friend, keep watching for me until we're together again."
I am Leanne Neyland, and I am so grateful to have been Ann's daughter-in-law. Ann Neyland is one of the great loves of my life. I'm happy to be able to share with you all today about what she meant to me and my family. She never called me her daughter-in-law. She always introduced me as her daughter. Now, this was confusing sometimes. If Blake and I were together, and she'd say, "This is my son and this is my daughter." Of course, we're snuggled up. But that was just how she felt about me. It's been mentioned Ann only had brothers. Bob only had a brother. They had the sons, and then eventually the grandsons, and now 3 great-grandsons. So when Mary Kay and I came into the family, she was over the moon, and she couldn't have been happier. I've been married to her son for 35 years, and if there was ever a side to be taken, she took mine. In her later years, she joyfully anticipated and welcomed the first Neyland female offspring in Cora, as has already been mentioned. And the last time I saw her, which was on January 5th, she told me that she was so glad that she had gotten to know her, and Cora feels the same way. We were blessed to live here in Nashville on 2 different occasions. It was a special blessing for Luke. Ann and Luke did all kinds of things together. They went to the library, she read him books, they went to the science museum, ice skating, to the movies. I can still picture her in her little white Toyota Corolla, and she'd have Luke, Johnny, Casey, and Taylor in the back seat. And she loved spending time with them, and they loved spending time with her. She anticipated my needs the first time we lived here in Nashville. Blake and I were both back to work full time, and I worked all kinds of crazy hours, and so did he. And she would just anticipate my needs and meet them. She'd come by the house and say, "Oh, I just had this extra meal. I just thought you might could use it." Of course we could. She was always like that, so thoughtful. She was a genuinely positive person. She got an eye infection and lost one of her eyes, and you would have thought she got a paper cut. I mean, that was about as much attention that she paid to that. She saw the humor in things, and she laughed easily and often. She loved to call me. We would usually talk every week, and she especially loved to call and tell me funny stories of things that had happened. Even though Granny was sweet, and she was sweet, she also had boundaries. It took me years being in the family before she would let me load her dishwasher. But I finally convinced her. I said, "Granny, you show me how you want it done, and I will do it exactly like that." And then she started letting me do it. Also, there were never any pets in her house, and no fires in the fireplace. Those were off limits. Like other people have mentioned, she was the least judgmental person that I've known. She accepted you as you were. She didn't try to change you or fix you. She had too much faith for that. Even though she was never in a recovery program, she practiced let go and let God. Because of this, through all the challenges and changes that I've been through in my life, she was always a safe and steady place for me. So supportive and encouraging. The last time we saw her, we were able to tell her once again how much we loved her and how much she meant to us. And she said to us, "I feel so loved." And that just meant so much for us to know that she felt that way. She also told me that she was looking forward to seeing my dad, and they'd be waiting on the rest of us. I've been blessed beyond measure to know her and to be loved by her. There will never be another Ann in my life. There's no one that can ever replace her, but I do look forward to being reunited with her one day in heaven.
We're coming down near the end, and I'm Blake Neyland. I'm the younger, shorter, balder son of Ann Neyland. Let's just be honest. Let's get it out front there. I have several acknowledgments I want to make, and certainly the Nashville Church, and just the warmth, the hosting of everything is wonderful. Barry and Debbie have just taken care of us as a family. Audio-visual, I called David Bates. I knew the man to go to. And then we started working on songs. And Roscoe Gordon calls me and he says, we don't know that song because he lives. I mean, it's not in a songbook. It's nowhere to be found, whatever. So Roscoe endured me over the phone singing it to him. And after I finished, he said, I think I'll Google it. And then I want to acknowledge my father and wow, what a great caretaker he's been in the last several years. Reese mentioned it, just taking care of my mother with her limitations. And God put them together. There's no doubt in my mind he worked it out. University of Tennessee, it happened, and we needed her in the family. And I'll tell you this, I'm sure my grandfather, the general, he loved and adored his daughter-in-law. Very pleased. My mother's in a great place today. Very peaceful and serene, but she's a little uncomfortable. Of course, we talked about her being uncomfortable with people talking well of her. She wasn't really comfortable with that. She's also uncomfortable because her younger son has a live microphone in front of his face. She was always concerned about that. Funny story, I graduated in 1979 from Riverside Military Academy in Gainesville, Georgia. Okay, it was a down year for Riverside at the academy. Academically, it was kind of subpar. I snuck through there at the end, valedictorian. I saved that as a surprise for my parents. They drove from Kingsport, Tennessee to Gainesville for the graduation, and I remember I was waiting for them in the administrative building in the foyer. The commandant was there, and my parents came in, and I told them, I said, I'm the valedictorian. My mother's eyes just burst. I mean, with tears. She was proud. But then that pride was, I saw this look of concern growing, bordering on horror, as she realized that Blakey was going to be doing the valedictory address that day. And I got in some zingers. I sure did. I like to have fun. And she was very afraid, and I really enjoyed that. That was fun for me. But I connected early on with my mother on wanting to have fun. We both loved that, and we connected on that level. When I was 2 years old, I don't remember this. She told this story repeatedly all my life, but we were in Fair Acres subdivision in Bristol, Tennessee, and I was 2 years old, and my mother had been teaching for years. She stopped so she could stay home with me for a while before she went back to teaching. So she stuck with me, 2-year-old, and occasionally she'd like a break. So she'd step outside, go out the front door, the screen door, maybe greet a neighbor, maybe go to the mailbox. And I knew how to do it. I'd run up and lock the door. And I wonder if you know why I'd like to lock that door. Any guesses? I like to watch my mama have to climb in a window. That was hilarious to me. And I would belly laugh, and that was next level entertainment for a 2-year-old. Now, we really, she would threaten and ultimately, maybe discipline me, but the payoff was just too great. I kept doing it. And she laughed about that for days to come. We've talked about it today. She laughed constantly. She enjoyed life. She loved to laugh. She laughed at the days to come, as the scripture says. For years, Mother was part of an informal bridge club in Bristol, Tennessee. You remember that, Reese? Now, who knew they had such culture in Bristol, Tennessee? But 8 or 10 women, they would have 8 or 10 women over to the house, over to different houses, and of course, and it was every week or two, and of course, it would roll around, and we would be hosting. And we had a 3-bedroom, 1,400 square foot house, and 8 to 10 women in there, and it was raucous. I mean, Mother would put me to bed and assume I was asleep, but but you couldn't sleep through this. I mean, it was just crazy stuff going on. I had to walk out a couple times and ask him to keep it down. And my mother laughed about that. She thought that was hilarious. You know, we've talked a good bit about my mother's generosity, her warmth, kindness. Very true, very, very, very true. You know, Reese talked about it, but we could shed light on the fact that she was a tough farm girl. I mean, she was rugged. She had a work ethic. She got her master's degree while she was teaching full time. And they didn't have online programs back then. It may have been on weekends or whatever, at nights. And I'd hear that well past midnight. I'd hear that typewriter banging. And then I'd hear the bathwater, small house again, I'd hear that bathwater being drawn at 5 a.m. That makes an impression on a young man. I mean, we called her Dr. Neyland. She would diagnose you, treat you, and send you to school. Reese and I weren't staying home. I remember in particular, one time when I was 7 or 8 years old, I was playing on the carport. I was climbing up a rail on the carport. My feet got stuck, fell back. My head was bounced off the concrete. I mean, I wasn't there. I've heard it described. And, I mean, I was there. I wasn't there mentally after a while. The head bounces off the concrete. I mean, I was out for 15 minutes, okay? I revived. This may explain a lot. But then, so the next day, I'm off to school, okay? So I go to school. I start getting nauseated like people with a grade 3 concussion do. And I start throwing up all over the place. My mom has to come get me. She takes me to the good old Dr. Neyland. Remember Dr. Neyland? Yeah, Dr. Neyland says he chewed her out really good. And but she wasn't defensive. She just took it as a lesson to learn. You know, if you haven't figured it out by now, and Reese alluded to it, Mother did not worry about us, perhaps like a lot of parents do. She did not worry. Now, Reese and I gave our parents plenty of reasons to be concerned, particularly when it came to being out late at night with family cars. I'll just say that. Now, good old careful, disciplined older brother Reese, he had about 4 car wrecks his first year. Okay? I would come home from school, and I'd walk in the door and I'd see Reese at the dining room table with his head down like this. And I'd look at my mother and I'd go, again? Yeah. And I played the obnoxious little brother. She would go, shh. And then she would, I gave her plenty of reasons to be concerned about driving, trust me, you know, and cars and stuff. And like Reese said, no curfew, you know, it was something else. Now, she, and I remember specifically on a couple of occasions, she said, look, when you go out, I'm not waiting up for you, okay? I'm not waiting up for you. If something happens to you, you're lying in a ditch somewhere, the highway patrol is going to find you before I do. That's true. And, yeah. In this day of helicopter parents, you know, Mother would probably say, a little less helicopter, a little more highway patrol, or a little more higher power, even better. You know, as I've gotten to be an older man, and the inevitable challenges of life have come. Had to face them. And I would always think about, what would my mother think? How would she process this challenge? And it inspired me. It gave me peace. You know, my mother was My mother was progressive before being progressive was cool. We all talked about it. She accepted diversity. You heard you could look down your row, see diversity here today. Reese is looking pretty diverse, I think, this afternoon. Now but there'd be just she just accepted people for who they are. She accepted her grandsons. She accepted differences between her sons. I remember, Reese is going to kill me for sharing this, okay? But this is what younger brothers do. You got a shot. You take it. But she was, Reese and I were reminiscing recently about Mother, and he said, he was talking about another one of those talks, where she'd take him around the neighborhood. So she asked him to go around the neighborhood, and Reese again, he's like, what is this about? What's going on here? And she says, Reese, you're tall, you're good looking, and you're a star athlete. And her message basically was, just be careful of the decisions you make with women. And Reese was sharing that with me, and I thought, wow. I said, I don't remember having that conversation with me. Can we be honest today? We mentioned the flood. The Nashville church was wonderful. My mother, to my mother, it's just things. That was powerful. I was 50 years old, and it's just things. One of my, as we close, one of my favorite contemporary Christian songs is I Will Sing of the goodness of God. And I'll make this commitment to you. I'll make it to you. I will acknowledge and praise the goodness of God all the days of my life, if for no other reason because of the great mama he gave me. I know everyone in this room has been touched indirectly or directly by the words and the life of this beautiful, remarkable woman. Thank you, God. Thank you, Mama. Let's pray. Dear God, thank you for this time to honor my mother and glorify you, hopefully. And thank you for the Nashville Church. Thank you for the opportunity to fellowship. Thank you for such great blessings. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Please join us in the back. There's, I'm directionally challenged. I think it's behind us. There's fellowship hall. Some of you have come great distances. I know you may or may not be able to stay, but we would love to visit with you. Thank you very much.